He gave his only Son. Do not love the world or the things in the world. The love of the Father is not in those who love the world. For all that is in the world, the desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, the pride in riches, comes not from the Father but from the world. Both these writings, the former from the Gospel according to John, the latter from the text called the first letter of John, may very well come from the same author. Or the letter, comes from the school of the Gospel writer and is outlining interpretations and elaborations on the Gospel, as students commonly did in the ancient world. But on the face of it, the message seems quite contradictory. For God so loved the world was made through him. Don't love the world. So it's worth exploring what the author means by world. The Spirit inspired these writings, and I think that means that the Spirit worked with and through the faculties, mindset and predisposition of the people as they were. The writers were allowed to be truly themselves. And these texts, the Gospel and the letters, seem to display someone with a preference initially for quite dualistic thinking and generalisations, with some words, like world, doing a huge amount of heavy lifting in meaning, which does not make for easy, straightforward understanding. Sometimes he means the created order, as in the world came into being through him. Sometimes he means people and societal structures. That's the world. And a subset of that category, which rejects God as revealed in Jesus Christ, also gets termed world. But I think it would be nonsensical for John in one breath to say, the world which came into being through the Word, who is Jesus, that God so loves, and then in another to say, don't love the world which came into being through Christ. It seems nonsensical. Unless we understand world in this passage as that which is in open rebellion against God by participating in sins which can be so appealing. Pride in riches, desire of the eyes, desire of the flesh. We can be tempted to chase those things. We might even fall into them carelessly without realising it. The author, therefore, cautions us against corrupted desires which lead us away from Jesus. And one aspect of that corruption is that our fundamental identity is eroded. You can become so lost in those things that the value which God gives us, every one of us, is sapped, even as we seek to build ourselves up through wealth, pride, the desire of the flesh. Those things which can seem so desirable, satisfying, which on the surface build us up, and yet, to quote Admiral Akbar from Star Wars, it's a trap. I had to get a chuckle out of that. I heard one over here, thank you. That was not a bad Admiral Akbar impersonation, actually. So one way to elude that trap is to embrace deeply that section in chapter 3 which speaks of our identities as children of God. The truth of who we are, which is not otherwise dependent on our achievements or anything, though they have their place. And that's a lot easier said than done. It really is. It's a lot easier said than done. So how would you feel and what would you think of yourself if you weren't able to work in paid employment anymore, or you weren't able to volunteer, if your body or mind wore down through sickness or age, and you couldn't do some of those things anymore which gave you meaning, if you had to slow down, if you couldn't say to anyone that you were busy, which can be such a mark of pride. And you know, I confess to you, genuinely, when the Opshop project launched last Saturday, part of me was sad and afraid because I realised I took pride in getting that organised, and I no longer had that project as proof of productive output. And that exposed sinful pride which was not of God. And it exposed a love for the world in a negative sense. I confess to you that. But do you have anything like that in your life? It's not easy to just rest in God's love and our identity as children of God. And a couple of anecdotes or analogies came to mind. One is that some sailors attest that surviving in a storm or trouble is not as difficult as surviving calm. The busyness and the activity, it's seductive in a way. Another, I've heard directly from some military veterans that times of quiet and inactivity on the base or the ship or whatever, that can be really difficult psychologically. So quietly resting in just being, as simple as it is, can be seriously uncomfortable. But it is so important. Just being reflects a trust in who God says we are. And the person who I think said it best is Monica Furlong. She was a British author, journalist, activist, called by the Church of England their most influential layperson of the post-war period. And she wrote a passage in a 1965 book titled With Love to the Church, which is one of those things which seared itself into my mind when I heard it. It did so because, first, it rang so true, and second, because though I took the words as being prophetically true, I did not, and still do not, think that many Christians, many clergy, including myself, measure up to the calling she gives. Now, she does refer to, in this passage, to clergy, but I think it's easily just translatable to any Christians, the priesthood of all believers. So when you hear that word clergy, just think Christian. All of us here, people who have cause and calling to rest securely in their identity as children of God. So this is what she writes. I'm clear about what I want from the clergy, Christians. I want them to be people who can, by their own happiness and contentment, challenge my ideas about status, success, and money, and so teach me how to live more independently of such drugs. I want them to be people who can dare, as I do not dare, and as few of my contemporaries dare, to refuse to work flat out and to refuse to work more strenuously than me. I want them to be people who dare, because they are secure enough in the value of what they are doing, to have time to read, to sit and think, and to face the emptiness and possible depression which often attacks people when they do not keep the surface of their mind occupied I want them to be people who have faced this kind of loneliness and discovered how fruitful it is. And I want them to be people who have faced the problem of prayer. I want them to be people who can sit still without feeling guilty, from who I can learn some kind of tranquility in a society which has almost lost the art. It may be true that it is only insofar as the clergy start by exploring their inner loneliness and its relation to Christian belief that all their hard work is going to reach others who, for one reason or another, are alone, and so begin to heal our society. If they do not begin from a vast clearing of quietness around the offering of worship, a quietness which they can discover who they are and so enter into genuine relationships with others, then they are indeed second-rate social workers, and it were better that they were swept away. I hope there's something in that for you. Beware the lies which sins promise. It's a trap. When we fail, because, as the writer of the letter says in chapter 1, if we say we have no sin, the truth is not in us. When we fail, we turn to Christ. And we turn to Christ always, trusting that we are God's children, and we will not be let go. So the Lord be with you and grant you peace this day.